The slap cracked through the cafe like a dropped plate. For one frozen second, every cup, every laptop, every hushed phone call inside the sunlit bookstore Café fell silent. A red mark bloomed across Marcus Cole's cheek, just beside the pale scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. But he did not move. He did not raise a hand. He did not even blink. He simply stood there in his faded canvas jacket, holding his 7-year-old daughter against his chest, while the woman in front of him stared back, still shaking from the fury that had made her strike him. Diana Whitfield expected him to shrink. She expected an apology, maybe tears, maybe the stammering fear she was used to seeing on the faces of people who understood exactly how far below her they stood. What she got instead was stillness, a stillness so complete that the room itself seemed to lean back a step. Lily's small fingers curled into her father's collar. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. Marcus's hand moved over her back in slow, even strokes, the same rhythm he had once used to calm frightened men in the back of a helicopter, and now used for the only person left on Earth who could undo him completely. "How about you, lil' bug?" he said quietly. Then he looked up at Diana again. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Are you finished?" That question was the first thing that frightened her, though she wouldn't understand why for another few minutes. She didn't know that the tired-looking man in work boots and a thrift store jacket was not a nobody. She didn't know that for 11 years he had operated in places that never appeared on any map handed to civilians. She didn't know that 3-star generals still returned his calls personally. And she didn't know that the most dangerous thing about him wasn't what his hands could do. It was what he was choosing not to do with them. Before we go further, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you believe people deserve dignity, even when the world hands them none, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us that real strength rarely announces itself. Sometimes it just stands still until the truth fills the whole room on its own. Now, back to Marcus Cole. That morning in Denver had started with pancakes, one missing sock, and a promise Marcus intended to keep. He'd picked the corner table at Rowan Bean, the little bookstore cafe 2 blocks from their apartment, because it gave him a clear line to the door, the side exit by the restrooms, and the counter. Old instincts didn't retire just because a man did. He sat with his back near the wall, shoulders loose enough that ordinary people wouldn't notice anything, eyes moving just enough that a trained person would notice everything. He had left the service 4 years ago. Some part of him had never fully come home. To everyone else in the cafe, he looked like an ordinary tired dad in his late 30s. Weathered face, canvas jacket, jeans gone soft to the knees, boots that had walked through more than sidewalks. But a soldier would have clocked more. The way his hands rested loosely near the table's edge, never far from a clean angle to move. The faint scar. The breathing that was slow not from calm, but from discipline. Across from him, Lily Cole was interrogating a cinnamon roll with the focus of a tiny surgeon. She wore a purple raincoat covered in sewn-on stars, mismatched socks, and one shoe on the wrong foot, because Marcus had learned 2 years ago which battles were worth fighting and which weren't. At 7, she was quick, funny, and fiercely stubborn in the particular way kids get when the world has already taken something from them early. Her mother, Elena, had died in a highway accident when Lily was 4. Marcus had been overseas when it happened, and by the time he made it home, there had already been a funeral he wasn't there for. He'd been a Force Recon Marine then, the kind of operator who went places official reports never mentioned, who did work that generals thanked quietly and never in writing. He had pulled men out of collapsed buildings, run counter-ambush missions in mountains with no names on civilian maps, and once carried an unconscious pilot 4 miles through snow. None of it had prepared him for a phone call in a language he understood perfectly and still couldn't process. So he left the service. He packed away the medals Lily had never seen, moved to Colorado, and built a small, quiet life out of school drop-offs, grocery runs, bedtime stories, and the sacred, unglamorous work of keeping one little girl's world soft. That morning, Lily had asked for a cinnamon roll, the big one, with the extra icing, and Marcus had said yes, because she made it through an entire week without waking up scared in the middle of the night. "Daddy," she said, cheeks dusted with sugar, "can we go to the Science Museum after this?" Marcus smiled, and when he smiled, The hard lines in his face briefly remembered what he'd looked like before deployments taught him to always face the door. Only if that roll doesn't end up on your jacket. She looked down. Icing everywhere. Too late. Then we negotiate. She laughed, and the sound did something to him no combat medal ever had. It made every hard year worth it. Rowan Bean was busy that morning. Grad students, two remote workers arguing softly about a deadline, an older couple sharing the crossword. It was the kind of unpretentious place Marcus actually liked, which was rare for him. Lily loved their hot chocolate, the kind with a little chocolate-dipped spoon stuck in the whipped cream. So they came here on good mornings. Love, sometimes, is choosing the noisy places because someone small is happy in them. Then Diana Whitfield walked in. She didn't enter like a customer. She entered like a hostile takeover. A charcoal Brunello Cucinelli coat, sunglasses despite the overcast sky, heels clicking like a countdown. Two assistants trailed her, eyes fixed on tablets, faces tight with the particular fear of people paid to absorb someone else's mood. Behind them moved Derek Voss, her driver and personal security, a broad man in a dark suit whose eyes swept the room with the practiced calm of someone who used to do this job for a living, somewhere that mattered more. Diana was 44, founder and CEO of Solvex Dynamics, a defense technology firm with contracts spanning drone guidance systems, secure communications, and battlefield sensor networks. Trade magazines called her a visionary. Former employees called her ruthless. Competitors called her expensive trouble. She called herself simply undeniable. That morning, she was in Denver to close a Department of Defense procurement deal worth more than some small nation's annual budgets. And the delay in signing had put her in the kind of mood that made everyone around her speak in short, careful sentences. I don't care what compliance flagged, she snapped in her phone, cutting straight through the ordering line. If legal can't clear the language by 11, replace legal. I am not losing $400 million because someone discovered a conscience. A young man near the register glanced up as she pushed past him. Ma'am, the line's actually back. Diana lowered her sunglasses just enough to look at him properly. I'll make more before 9 a.m. than you'll make this entire year. Don't confuse proximity to me with relevance to me. He flushed and stepped back. A few people glanced over. Most looked down. Money has a way of making cruelty look like confidence, Marcus noted, and said nothing. Every entitled person in a room wasn't automatically his problem. His problem, his whole morning, his whole life, was the small girl across the table. Lily, meanwhile, had decided she was old enough to bus her own plate. She slid out of the booth carrying her mug of hot chocolate in both hands, humming a cartoon theme under her breath, weaving carefully between chairs. Marcus tracked her without meaning to. Lily to trash bin, 12 feet. Path mostly clear. Woman on phone, closing angle, not looking up. Collision risk rising. His body reacted before his thoughts finished forming. Lily, hold on. She froze mid-step. Diana rounded the pastry case at the same instant, eyes still on her phone, and walked straight into her. The mug shattered. Hot chocolate splashed across the floor and speckled the hem of Diana's coat. Lily fell backward hard, landing on the tile with a gasp that turned something cold in Marcus's chest. The cafe went silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to hiss more quietly. Lily sat stunned in a mess of broken ceramic, eyes wide, lip already trembling. Diana looked down, not at the child first, but at her coat. Her expression didn't shift into concern. It shifted into fury. Are you serious? She snapped. Lily's eyes filled. I'm sorry. Do you have any idea what this coat cost? Diana's voice climbed, sharp enough to turn heads across the room. Where's whoever is supposed to be watching you? Letting a child run wild like. She reached down, not gently, as if to yank Lily up by the arm. She never made contact. Marcus was already there. No one saw him cross the distance. 1 second he was at the booth. The next he was standing between Diana and his daughter, flannel and old scar tissue and a stillness that filled the space like a wall. He didn't shove her. He didn't raise his voice. Back up, he said. Diana recoiled half a step, startled by how suddenly he'd simply appeared. For a fraction of a second, Some old animal instinct told her she'd stepped too close to something she didn't understand. Pride crushed that instinct almost immediately. She took him in: canvas jacket, work boots, a watch that cost maybe $40, a tired face. Her read was instant and wrong. Nobody. Powerless. Beneath consideration, Marcus crouched, never taking his eyes off her, and lifted Lily into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder, crying quietly, more embarrassed than hurt. His hand cupped the back of her head. "You're okay, Bug. I've got you." He stood and faced Diana fully. "You were on your phone. You walked into her. You're going to lower your voice, apologize to my daughter, and walk away." Diana laughed, short and brittle. "Apologize to her? She just ruined a coat that cost more than your car." Marcus's eyes didn't change. Coats can be replaced. Kids remember. The line landed harder than he expected. A woman near the window looked down. A barista stopped wiping the counter. The young man Diana had insulted earlier lifted his phone slightly. Recording now, Diana felt the shift and hated it. People were watching her, not with the usual mixture of fear and admiration, but with judgment. "Listen to me," she hissed. "I am Diana Whitfield. I have signed contracts this week worth more than this entire block. I am in this city to finalize a federal defense deal that would fund your entire life 1,000 times over. And I'm not going to be lectured by a grocery store dad with a badly behaved kid." Lily flinched at badly behaved and pressed harder into her father's neck. Marcus's breathing slowed. "Quieter now. Don't talk about my daughter again." Diana stepped closer. "Or what?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus didn't look angry. That was what made it unsettling. "Angry men warn you. Calm men have already decided. Or you'll regret it," he said softly. Her face flushed with humiliation rather than fear. "I'll call CPS. I'll tell them you threatened me in public. I'll have that child looked into before lunch. People like you always have something to hide." That was the moment something in Marcus went very quiet and very cold. Not because she'd insulted him. That meant nothing. Men far scarier than her had tried that in languages she'd never hear. But she had threatened Lily, Elena's daughter. The promise he had made to himself the night he came home to an empty apartment. "You're done talking," he said. "Leave." But Diana Whitfield had lived a long time without consequences, and power had trained her to treat every boundary as disrespect. Fury made her reckless. She swung and slapped him across the face, full force. The sound stopped the cafe cold. A pitcher slipped from a barista's hand and clattered against the tile. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus's cheek reddened. Lily whimpered against his shoulder. He did nothing. That stillness unsettled the room more than shouting would have. Everyone had braced for retaliation. Instead, he simply absorbed it, the way a hillside absorbs weather. Diana, still breathing hard, stared at him, and for the first time noticed he hadn't moved from the impact. Noticed the scar. Noticed the total absence of fear in his eyes. "Are you finished?" he asked. Flat. No threat in it. Just the sound of a door about to close for good. Then the door burst open for real. Derek Voss shoved through the crowd, one hand already drifting toward his jacket, his big frame parting customers like water. "Ma'am, step back." Then, to Marcus, "You put the kid down and back off before I put you on the floor." Marcus didn't move. Derek closed 2 more steps, and then he saw the scar. Then the eyes. Then, where Marcus's sleeve had shifted while holding Lily, the faded edge of a tattoo on his forearm. A compass rose wrapped in rope. Derek stopped so fast his shoes squeaked against the tile. All the color left his face. 8 years earlier, Derek Voss had been a young Army sergeant pinned down with his squad in a ravine outside Kandahar. Radios dying, 2 men bleeding out, and no way in or out. He'd been loud back then, sure that fear was something other men confessed to. By hour 11, he knew better. They'd stopped hoping when 4 figures came down the rock face with no lights and no hesitation. Recon Marines. 20 minutes later, the ravine was quiet, except for wounded men breathing. The man who'd carried Derek's medic across open ground, absorbing 2 rounds into his plate carrier without breaking stride, had turned once under moonlight, scar along the jaw, compass tattoo on his forearm, eyes that didn't flinch at anything. Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole. In certain circles, they still called him the Quiet Hand. And now, Derek was standing 4 feet from him in a bookstore cafe, having just threatened to put him on the floor. He raised both hands, palms out. Staff Sergeant. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you. The cafe went so quiet a spoon settling into a saucer sounded enormous. Diana stared at her driver. Derek, what are you doing? He didn't look at her. Mom. His voice was low, urgent. You need to apologize. Right now. Then we need to go. Apologize? She snapped. He threatened me. Derek finally turned to face her, and what she saw in his expression wasn't fear of losing his job. It was pity. No, ma'am. You threatened his daughter. Then you hit him. In front of everyone. He unclipped his earpiece and set it on a nearby table. I quit. Diana's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Derek looked back at Marcus. Staff Sergeant, I apologize for the approach. I didn't recognize you. You were doing your job, Marcus said. Derek swallowed. No, sir. I was doing hers. That sentence moved through the room like a blade. Phones were fully up now, filming, not just a confrontation, but a reversal. The woman in the designer coat losing command of the one man paid to enforce her will. Diana looked around and understood, too late, that people weren't afraid of her anymore. They were watching, judging, waiting. Her pride panicked before her brain caught up. This is absurd, she said. I don't care whatever military reunion you two think this is. I am Diana Whitfield. I have a $400 million defense contract closing this week. I have people at the Pentagon who take my calls personally. I will not be humiliated by a washed-up soldier and a driver with a guilty conscience. Marcus shifted Lily slightly. Take the loss and go. My loss. She laughed wild. You think this is over? I'll call General Holloway myself. He runs acquisitions oversight. He'll have you removed from this building. And by dinner someone will be asking why you're raising a child alone. Derek said, low Diana. Don't. She was already dialing. She put it on speaker and held it up like a weapon. It rang twice. A clipped, irritated voice answered. Diana, this better be about the final signature page. Robert, she said, snapping into a polished tone so fake several people nearby exchanged looks. I'm sorry to interrupt. I've just been assaulted in a cafe. A man threatened me after his child ran into me, and my own driver is refusing to intervene because apparently he knows him. A pause. Diana, call the police. I'm in a briefing. He called him Staff Sergeant, she said, glaring at Marcus. Apparently the man has a scar and some kind of compass tattoo, and my driver looks like he's seen a ghost. The line went silent. Not quiet, silent. Robert? General Holloway's voice returned, and the irritation was gone, replaced by something careful. Describe him again. I just did. Jacket, scar on his jaw, tattoo, holding a crying kid. Another pause. Then, slowly, put him on the phone. Diana blinked. Excuse me? Put him on the phone, Diana. Now. The command in his voice was sharp enough that even she obeyed. She held the phone out toward Marcus. He didn't take it. He leaned toward the speaker instead. Holloway. It's Cole. On the other end, inside a Pentagon annex, General Robert Holloway closed his eyes and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. Every senior officer connected to special operations knew that name. Marcus Cole had pulled down pilots out of terrain that officially didn't exist, extracted hostages from places no aircraft was clear to enter, and personally carried men home whose stars now sat on their shoulders. Holloway owed him more than courtesy. He owed him people. Marcus, he said, and everyone in the cafe heard the weight in that single word. It's been a while. How's Lily? Diana's face went pale. The phone shook in her hand. Marcus rubbed his daughter's back. She was having a good morning. Then your contractor knocked her down, screamed at her, threatened to have her taken from me, and slapped me when I asked her to apologize. Silence stretched long enough to feel physical. Holloway's voice came back cold. She slapped you. She did. Robert, wait, Diana rushed in. He was aggressive. His child ran into... Stop talking, Holloway snapped, and the force of it made her flinch. You were standing in front of a man who has done more for this country than your entire board could understand if I briefed them for a month. The fact that you struck him and are still standing there isn't a sign of your power. It's a sign of his restraint. Robert, the contract. There is no contract. The words landed clean and flat. Effective immediately, Solvex Dynamics is suspended from all pending DoD procurement discussions, pending review. Diana staggered slightly. You can't do that. I can, and I just did. If your judgment lets you assault a decorated Marine and threaten his kid in public, I have serious concerns about your judgment around classified systems. Don't call me again without counsel present. A pause, and his voice softened only for the next part. Marcus, I'm sorry. Give Lily my best. Marcus nodded once, though the general couldn't see it. Take care, Robert. The call ended. Diana stood in the middle of the cafe, phone still raised, face drained of color. In under 3 minutes, the foundation of her company had cracked in front of baristas, grad students, a retired couple, a stranger's phone camera, and one little girl with tear-streaked cheeks. The silence in the room had changed shape. It wasn't shock anymore. It was consequence. Then came the lights, red and blue sweeping across the front windows. 2 officers stepped inside, hands loose near their belts, scanning the room. The older one, Officer Grant, took in a shattered mug, the spilled cocoa, the tense customers, the trembling executive, and a father holding a child with a visible red mark on his own face. We got a call about a disturbance. Diana lunged toward them like rescue had finally arrived. Officers, thank God. Arrest that man. He threatened me. His child attacked me, and my driver has lost his mind. Grant looked at Marcus, then at Lily, then at the mark on Marcus's cheek. Before anyone could answer, the young man Diana had insulted at the register stood up. His voice shook, but he didn't sit down. Officer, she's lying. I recorded the whole thing. He held up his phone. She cut the line, insulted people, ran into the kid, screamed at her, threatened the dad, and slapped him. It's all here. A woman by the window stood too. So do I. Same, said someone near the back. 3 angles, another added. The kid did nothing wrong. For the first time that morning, Diana Whitfield had no room left to rewrite what had happened. Officer Grant exhaled the way a man does when he's seen this particular kind of entitlement one too many times. Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back. Absolutely not. Do you have any idea who? I know you're being placed under arrest for assault. You could discuss the rest downtown. The cuffs clicked shut. That sound changed the room more than the phone call had. The call had wounded her company. The cuffs touched her. She started shouting then, threats about lawyers, board members, city officials. No one moved to help her. Derek stood off to the side, jaw tight. The baristas watched. The phones kept recording. Marcus turned Lily gently away so she wouldn't see the rest of it. As the officers walked Diana toward the door, she looked back once. Hatred and fear tangled together on her face. He returned neither. He didn't gloat. He hadn't crossed that cafe for revenge. He'd crossed it for love. That was the whole reason. When the door shut behind her, the cafe didn't come back to life right away. People seemed unsure what kind of noise belonged after something like that. A barista approached, hands shaking slightly. Sir, I'm so sorry. We'll replace the mug, the cocoa, everything, she said. Marcus shook his head. It's fine. No, the woman said, surprising herself with how firm it came out. It wasn't. He looked at her, then nodded once. No, it wasn't. Lily lifted her head from his shoulder, eyes red. Daddy, I dropped the cup. That nearly undid him more than the slap had. Not the threats. Not the old memory Derek's face had stirred loose. Just his daughter apologizing for broken ceramic when she was the one who'd been knocked down. He kissed the top of her head. Cups can be replaced, Bug. She was really mad. Yeah, because of me? No, he said gently. Because some people carry storms inside them, and they blame whoever happens to be standing closest. Lily thought about that seriously, the way kids do with things adults make complicated. Do we still get the museum? A small, startled laugh moved through the room. Marcus smiled, real and warm. We still get the museum. And ice cream after. With sprinkles? All the sprinkles. Derek stepped closer, slower now, almost shy. Staff Sergeant. Marcus looked at him. Kandahar, Derek said quietly. You got Ruiz out. Our medic. I remember. He's got 2 kids now. Talks about that night every year. Derek hesitated. Your daughter's lucky. Lily sniffled against her father's shoulder. I know. That answer settled something over the room, quiet this time instead of tense. Marcus carried her toward the door. The young man from the register stepped up, awkward. Sir, I should have said something sooner. You said something when it counted, Marcus told him. Outside, Denver's morning light spilled gray gold across the sidewalk, cool after the heat of everything that had just happened inside. Marcus stepped into it with Lily in his arms, leaving behind the broken mug, the spilled cocoa, the phones, and a company that had just started shaking. He didn't look back. But consequences don't stop just because a man walks away from them. By noon, the video was everywhere. The first headlines used the easy language of outrage. Defense CEO slaps single father in Denver cafe. Then veterans started identifying Marcus, not with classified specifics, but with enough reverence to shift the tone entirely. Recon Marine stays calm, while executive threatens his kid. Defense contractor loses Pentagon deal after public assault. By late afternoon, Solvex Dynamic stock had dropped enough to trigger emergency board calls. People who had tolerated Diana's cruelty for years, as long as it produced returns, discovered sudden ethical clarity the moment it threatened the share price. Federal auditors opened a review. The DoD confirmed all pending Solvex contracts were frozen. Diana's attorneys released a statement about a regrettable, stressful misunderstanding. The internet replayed the slap several million times and misunderstood none of it. Marcus learned most of this from Derek, who called once, not to gossip, but to warn him that reporters were starting to dig through public records. His first instinct was to disappear. Old habit. Control exposure, protect the perimeter, keep Lily out of frame. But that evening, while Lily colored dinosaurs at the kitchen table, Marcus stood at the sink washing dishes and realized something heavier than anything from the cafe that morning. Lily had watched a powerful adult hurt someone and lie about it. She had also watched strangers stand up, a driver tell the truth, a general defend a stranger's honor, and her father refuse violence when violence would have been easy and satisfying. That lesson mattered more than any headline. Daddy, she called from the table, was that lady bad? He dried his hands and sat across from her. Elena would have known the right words for this. She'd always been better with the soft truths. She did a bad thing, he said. Lily frowned. But is she bad? I don't know, Bug. Sometimes people build a whole life where nobody ever tells them no. Then the first time someone does, the ugly comes out fast. She colored a dinosaur's spine green. Do you think she's sorry? He thought of Diana's face as the cuffs closed. Fear, rage, humiliation, not sorrow. Not yet. I hope she gets there, he said. That's different. Lily nodded, accepting the complication the way kids do. You didn't hit her back. No. Were you scared? Not of her. Then why didn't you? He looked at his hands. Hands trained once to break things, now mostly used for shoelaces, dinosaur puzzles, and steadying a small person after the world knocked her down. Because being strong doesn't mean doing everything you're capable of, he said. Sometimes it means choosing what not to do. Lily considered that like it was math, like not eating all my Halloween candy at once. He laughed exactly like that. She grinned, pleased with herself, and went back to her dinosaur. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a statement through lawyers. A handwritten note on plain cream paper, left on his porch by courier. He almost threw it out when he saw the name, Diana Whitfield. But Lily was at school, the apartment was quiet, and something told him that avoiding it would only give it more power than reading it would. So he sat at the table and read. It wasn't polished. There were crossed out lines, spots where the pen had pressed too hard. She wrote that she'd watched the video twice with the sound off because she couldn't stand to hear herself. She wrote that she'd built Solvex after her father told her no woman could run a defense company, and that somewhere in the climbing, she'd mistaken cruelty for strength because cruelty got faster results. She wrote that none of it excused anything. She didn't ask him to speak on her behalf. She didn't ask him to drop anything. She didn't ask to meet Lily. Near the end, one line stopped him cold. I watched your daughter apologize to me for a cup I broke, and I understood, finally, that I had become someone children are afraid of. Marcus folded the letter and sat with it a long time. A week later, At the first hearing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. A few veterans stood quietly along the side wall. No organizing, just presence. Derek sat 2 rows behind Marcus. Diana came in without the coat, without sunglasses, without an entourage. A plain dark dress. She looked smaller than she had in the cafe. The judge reviewed the charges: assault, disorderly conduct, the video evidence. Diana's attorney rose, ready to smooth every edge. She touched his sleeve and shook her head. Then she stood on her own. "Your Honor," she said, voice unsteady but audible, "I don't contest the facts. I struck Mr. Cole. I threatened him. I frightened his daughter. I lied to the responding officers. There's no context that makes any of that acceptable." Her attorney closed his eyes. Cameras clicked softly. The judge leaned forward. "You understand what you're saying?" "Yes." She turned slightly toward Marcus. Her eyes weren't asking to be rescued. That mattered. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. Not because I lost the contract. Not because I was arrested. Because your daughter was hurt, and for one moment, I made her believe she'd done something wrong just by being in my way." Marcus said nothing. The room stayed quiet. "I can't undo it," she added. "I can only name it." The judge ordered community service, mandatory counseling, a public apology, and restitution to the cafe. The assault charge stayed on her record. Outside, reporters shouted questions Marcus ignored. Diana ignored them too. But as he reached the courthouse steps, she spoke behind him. "Staff Sergeant." He stopped, didn't turn right away. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. He turned. "No one does." Her eyes filled, but she held it together. Would she be all right? He glanced toward the street, where Lily waited with Derek's wife, eating a granola bar and swinging her legs off the curb. "She has questions." Diana nodded, something crossing her face that looked almost like grief. "Kids shouldn't have to." "No," Marcus said. "They shouldn't." She took a breath. "I resigned this morning. From the company. The board would have pushed me out anyway. I wanted to sign it myself." For a moment, the woman who'd claimed to own people stood on the courthouse, steps commanding nothing at all. "What now?" Marcus asked. She looked down. "Learn how not be obeyed, I guess." It was the first thing she'd said to him that didn't sound rehearsed. He nodded once. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. Just acknowledgement. Sometimes that's the only mercy the truth allows at first. Months later, people still told the story like it was instant karma. The slap, the driver freezing, the general's call, the CEO in handcuffs. Those parts were easy to repeat. They had shape and drama, and the satisfying rhythm of pride meeting consequence. Marcus never told it that way. When Lily asked about that morning, he talked about the museum afterward, the ice cream with too many sprinkles, and the young man at the register who'd stood up when it was still scary too. Derek visited once with Ruiz, the medic Marcus had pulled out years before, walking with a cane now, carrying photos of his kids. Lily made everyone sit on the living room floor and judge a dinosaur drawing contest. Marcus watched 2 veterans laugh with his daughter under a crayon mural taped to the wall and thought again about the promise he'd made himself the night he came home to an empty apartment. "She'll still laugh." She did. Not every day and not without shadows. But she laughed. As for Diana, she disappeared from headlines after donating most of her severance to veteran family programs and childhood trauma services. Some called it image repair. Maybe some of it was. People rarely change all at once. Grace isn't a magic trick. But 6 months after the cafe, a small package arrived with no return address. Inside was a plain ceramic mug painted with tiny dinosaurs, clearly picked by someone who'd spent a long time deciding whether sending anything was appropriate at all. No long letter this time. Just a card with 6 words. "Cups can be replaced. Trust can't." Marcus showed it to Lily. She ran a finger over the painted dinosaur and said, "She's trying." He looked at the mug, then out the window where the afternoon light touched the fence. "Maybe she's starting." "Starting's good," Lily said. "Yeah, Bug. Starting's good." That evening they took the mug to the park, filled with cocoa from home, because Lily had decided Café Cocoa was too dramatic now. They sat on a bench under the cottonwoods while the sky went orange over the mountains, her feet swinging above the grass, safe and warm against his side. Marcus's cheek had long since healed. The video had faded into the churn of newer outrage. But something in him had settled that hadn't been settled before. He'd spent most of his adult life believing strength meant missions completed, threats stopped, people brought home alive. Later, he'd learned strength was surviving grief without letting it swallow his daughter's childhood. That morning at the cafe had taught him one more version of it: the strength to stand between cruelty and innocence without becoming cruel himself. The strength to absorb humiliation without handing it down. The strength to let the room see the truth and trust that, given enough silence, the truth can defend itself. Lily looked up, cocoa on her lip. Daddy? Yeah. If someone's mean again, will you still not hit them? He wiped her lip with a napkin. I'll always protect you. But will you be quiet about it? He looked out across the park, where kids ran through the last light, and parents hauled them back from the edge of the path. If quiet's enough, he said yeah. And if it's not? He kissed the top of her head. Then I'll still be your dad first. She accepted that completely and went back to her cocoa. He put an arm around her and watched the sun drop behind the ridgeline. Dignity, he'd come to understand, isn't weakness dressed up politely. It's power, held on a short leash. It's the hand that doesn't strike back because a child is watching. It's a father who refuses to let someone else's cruelty decide who he becomes. And grace is whatever's left standing after the noise fades, after the cameras leave, after the internet moves on to its next outrage, after the world stops cheering for punishment and starts listening quietly for what might still be repaired. That morning, a powerful woman thought she'd struck a nobody. Instead, she struck a mirror. And in the silence that followed, everyone in that cafe saw exactly who they were.